In this series, lowimpact.org talks with people working to build a mutually owned, democratic, decentralised economy that builds community and doesn't destroy nature. We want to increase collaboration to bring about system change. Find links to the sites mentioned in the videos in the description below. Join the conversation by liking, commenting and subscribing to our channel.
So today I'm talking with Caroline Bennett of Sole of Discretion. Hi, Caroline.
Good morning.
And tell me if I've got this right. You're a cooperative selling fish caught by small fishing boats in Devon, in Plymouth. Is that right? Are you?
We're based in Plymouth, yep. We're a community interest company, so owned by the fishing community that land to us. And we are based in Plymouth, but we take from as far east as Eastbourne and as far west as kind of Penzance area.
Oh, right, so you've got a wide range. So we bought a fish box from you recently, a family fish box.
Thank you very much.
And we are very, very happy. I mean, it's there are 10 packs inside, and there's a range of different kind of fish. We've got wild salmon, flounder, cod, bass, and mackerel. And so it works out that each pack is about £5.50, which is £2, £2.70 something per person, which is really, really good value. And the fish is really high quality. We're very pleased. And I mean, you did mention this to me, so I think we're going to get eco packaging next time, because it was surrounded with polystyrene, but we can get eco packaging. Is that right?
You can opt. I'm afraid it's £1.50 more. That's fine. But you can opt for 100% card, so it literally just goes in with your card recycling, and it's great. Yeah, even the internal thermal bits are card, so that's an option for you.
We'll do that next time.
I'm sorry, it's not more obvious on the website. So note to self: need to make that more available.
Yeah, we'll definitely get that next time. So Low Impact promotes not just sustainability, but also community. We're about sustainable ways for people to get what they need, but also the ways that people can help decentralize the economy, both in what they consume and how they work. So we're very interested in supporting the small fishing boats. So tell me a bit about Sole of Discretion. Why did you set it up? What was your motivation?
Well, I love your anarchic approach to the way forward. It's great, Dave. So actually, I came to it really for my concern for environmental issues. Yeah. And I was quite dismissive of the fishing community at the beginning. So I was really worried about the devastation that the impact of eating fish was having on the marine environment.
All right.
So that was really my primary initial motivation. But it was through an organization called Slow Food, which is an Italian organization that is a loosely organized institution linking small scale producers of anything from honey to wheat to fish to end consumers. And they don't use the word consumer, actually. They go out of their way to avoid using the word consumer because it's so degrading.
Right.
But through them, I found a fantastic small-scale fisher based near Helford on the Lizard in Cornwall, and he really turned the whole way that we were operating then around, and showed me that you can rely on small-scale fisheries for your yeah, in that case it was a restaurant. So it was really through Slow Food actually that they really showed me that actually you can't have a protected environment without engagement from humans. So I came very late into the game on thinking that people were worth protecting. I was very much more it's the planet that needs protecting.
Yeah. What was your background before?
I owned a Japanese restaurant, which is why I still own a Japanese restaurant, which is why I got so into fish, because Bluefin Tuna was probably why I opened the restaurant. I absolutely loved it. I used to wake up as a sort of teenager dreaming of bluefin tuna for breakfast on a hungover Sunday morning. And when I came back to the UK from Japan, I was like, I need sushi. So I opened Britain's first conveyor belt sushi restaurant with
Oh, that was you. Oh, okay.
That was me, with a view to bringing Japanese food, which to young people now is completely like, what you mean there wasn't Japanese food around?
Yeah,
Sushi didn't exist. It's like I wanted to eat it as a poor student in London. So I was deliberately bringing it into the realm of being more accessible to everyone.
I lived in Japan for a year as well, and
beguiling country.
Yeah, another bluefin tuna was becoming very endangered, and but there wasn't any. I talked to lots and lots of Japanese people, and they said, "Oh, but it's delicious," and I'd say, "But it's becoming endangered," and they'd say, "Yeah, but it's delicious." And that was the end of the conversation. It was, yeah, but what's happening with bluefin tuna now?
Still pretty endangered.
Is it?
But there are signs of international cooperation on it that have meant, certainly in our seas, in the Mediterranean and that kind of area, where signs of it at least bottoming out. It's not continuing to go down. But then, I mean, I don't know the most recent stats, but it had got down from something like 100% of what was normal to about 96% had gone. So whether or not we're trailing on this 4%, or it's gone back up to say 10 or 20% of what it used to be, I don't know.
So how long have you been?
Out.
Sorry, how long have you been doing Sole of Discretion? When did you start?
We started on May the 6th, 2016.
Right. And how's business? How are you doing?
It was a struggle. It really was a struggle. So we set out. So I set out really to fill a gap in the market that I perceive. Running a restaurant, I felt the sort of first 2 decades of this century had been, as a restaurateur, easier to come by ethically sourced fish than a consumer at retail level. So my friends would say, you're Fishy Caroline, we want to eat what you think is ethical fish. Where do we go? And I couldn't actually tell them where, through my slow food knowledge, that they should be eating fish, unless you had a sort of marine biology degree. Even if you went to your local fishmonger and asked a few basic questions, you could be very easily blindsided by some of the answers. So it was really to plug that gap. It felt to me necessary. If you're going to sell fish and you want people to change their consumption habits, you have to make it easy for them. They don't have to have a degree in marine biology, not that I have. It shouldn't be hard for them. If people want to make that effort themselves, okay, I will forego that really tempting, delicious piece of farm salmon, and I will have a locally sourced bit of pollock. Doesn't sound as good, but I'll give it a go. Make it easy for them.
Yeah, I think there's a relatively small percentage of people who will go out of their way to do something for sustainability or community, but the vast majority, it has to be really easy and not more expensive, really. Otherwise, there won't be very much take up. I think you're absolutely right. How does the business work? Tell me how the business works.
Well, we set up originally, so the reason we're in Plymouth, I originally wanted to be in Eastbourne, actually. I knew a load of fishers there and I wanted to work with them locally there, and they had no market access to auctions, whereas there are 3 really good auctions now in the Southwest. There's Newlyn, Brixham and Plymouth. And the Plymouth one, they're all pretty good now because they've all gone electronic, but the Plymouth one really was the showcase of the Southwest in terms of really operating for the fisherman rather than the wholesaler or the end buyer. And down in Eastbourne, they were really at the mercy of the wholesale market. It's like, well, your fish might be selling in Plymouth for £5 a kilo, but how are you going to get it there? We'll give you £2.50. Oh, you don't want that deal? Oh, okay. So where else are you going to go? We'll offer you the same tomorrow. And of course, the fishermen were locked in this this mechanics of a business where they couldn't really maximize what they were, I would say, due. So we wanted to be there because of the absence of a market, but we were starting to work with an organic online delivery company who were based down in the Southwest, and they said, oh no, we want our fish to be local. I mean, like fish can be local, but anyway, so we started off in Plymouth because that was local to them. And then at the 11th hour, having been strung along on an exclusivity deal for about 2 years with them, we were told just before Christmas that they had got cold feet about fish. And I think genuinely they were worried about the ethics of fish, as anyone that goes into it will be. But they pulled out very abruptly. So then to sort of struggle from something where we thought we would be on 2 tons a week to nothing, it took us the best part of 3 years and really COVID to get back to a level where, thankfully, finally now we're washing our face.
Right.
So we were just about getting there before COVID, but you know, I don't want to sound gloating over COVID because so many people have really suffered, but it really made a difference to us.
Yeah, I'm hoping. Yeah, I'm hoping I'm hoping there will be a few silver linings. But so
I think a lot of people were they not pushed into having to look further and beyond their local supermarket for food, and that was just such an encouraging sign. I suppose what's slightly less encouraging is that at least, I don't know what percentage it would be, but a big chunk of them have now gone back to their familiar shopping habits. And it's like, how as a community do we capture those people that were prepared to give us a go when they had to, but they've now dropped that practice? How do we make it even more attractive to come and shop locally? But I think there's, you know, pre-COVID, local food was talked about but not really practiced, and it did get more practiced in the last couple of years, which is great.
We used to there was a guy who lived not far from us in South London, and he used to just on his own, he used to drive down with a van to the small fishing towns and come back and drop them at pickup points at pubs or shops around South London. There was one just down the road from us, and I used to cycle there and get the fish every Friday. And it was absolutely great because you never knew what you were going to get. You could have, it could be crab, it could be lobster, it could be shellfish, it could be, we had John Dory, we had all sorts of fish that we'd never seen before. It was a bit of an adventure. So we used to gut them ourselves, scale them and learn how to cook them. And it was a real adventure. It was fantastic. And we knew that we were helping the small fishing boats, but he was a lovely guy. I don't think he was the best businessman in the world, and he stopped doing it. So I'm really glad to have found you, because we want to eat a range of different kind of fish, and we want to help the small fishing boats. So I'm really happy to have found you. How do you define a small fishing boat? How do they compare in size to the big ones?
So there is a government definition, which is 10 meters and under, and that's how we, for a want of a different or better definition, or even, it's not so much even that, it's, you know, who's going to recognize my approach to small scale versus the government. So we've just stuck with the government's 10 meters or under. So that's the definition of small scale in Britain, and they are the ones that, even though there are around 2,500 vessels in England, and there are only about 500 larger ones, but they get just 4% of the quota. I
wanted to come to the quota later. Yeah,
we'll go to that later. Yeah,
so
small scale for me is essentially low impact on the environment, and there is no such thing as a perfect fishery, although some of these small scale gulls really are getting as close to perfect as you might want. I mean, a dived scallop, it doesn't get less interventionary on the environment than that. But generally, the low impact effect they have on the seabed for me is key. So they just even if they are impacting the seabed, the weight of the trawls that they may be using is so much lighter that it simply can't do the damage that some of these bigger beam trawlers can. So it's by virtue of its size, it's not capable of damaging as much. So I'm not saying it doesn't damage, but it certainly doesn't do as much.
I wanted to talk about that. 10 meters is tiny, isn't it? If a meter is a pace, isn't it? A good pace. So it's only sort of 10 paces, and that's the entire boat. That's a very small boat, isn't it? And so
Oh, it's a bit sneaky. So the way they measure it is under the hull. So a lot of it, the 10 meter is in the water.
Right.
So, I mean, this is the thing, and this is why it's so difficult. You can have older boats that haven't been kitted out with the newfangled technology to catch more fish and the bigger diesels and that kind of thing. And they still fish much more low impact than some of the newer under 10 meter boats, because the under 10 meter boats can be tiny underneath the water and then just go. And sometimes I'll go on the quay and say, we're buying from that boat, it looks huge. It's like, well, no, it's under 10 meters there.
Right,
So
okay.
it's not a perfect system. It really isn't, but it's, you know, where do you draw a line? So
Right.
I've just said, well, let's stick with the government's, because that's their definition.
Yeah.
There are a few, and I won't go into it now, you can ask me later, but well, there are things that we want to do in future to mitigate against that. But at the moment, so we're looking for small boats that have relatively little damage to the seabed, low carbon, which is something that I always assume there must be some economies of scale. If you're a bigger boat, per kilo of fish caught, you'd have thought you'd be using less fuel. But actually the complete opposite is true.
Oh, really?
Which I only learned relatively recently, like 5 years ago or so. But it's just, some of the most damaging fisheries can use up to 20 litres for a kilo of fish caught, whereas the small scale boats use between 2 and 5.
Wow.
Which is a lot of carbon, right? You know, can you imagine
Still is, yeah.
you know, 2 litres of fuel to get a kilo of fish? I mean, it's mind-blowing actually. Are fisheries ever going to be sustainable on that level of fuel use?
Well, I guess if you live next to the sea, just get out on the jetty with a fishing rod with a few mackerel hooks.
Totally.
Catch them yourself if you want to be absolutely certain. I wanted to talk a bit more about the sustainability of small scale fishing though. So there's the carbon, and you think a big one is the fact that they do sometimes trawl. If they're going to catch flat fish, I think they've got to trawl, haven't they?
Exactly.
But their equipment is smaller, so they just do less damage. Is that the?
It's much lighter, and they have these little things called hoppers. So they literally they're not digging into the bottom of the seabed. They're hopping over it. I mean, they actively don't want their gear to get lost on a rock or an outcrop of something. It's not what they want. So their nets are designed to hop on the bottom of the seabed rather than bed into it.
Right. And I've heard the argument that they're more difficult to regulate, and so the government don't know exactly what they're doing, so they might be less sustainable than the big boats. What do you think about that argument?
Interesting. I mean, I bet a big boat owner came up with that argument to the government. I mean, I think when quota changed back in the 90s, the government were really caught on the hop at just how many small boats there were. They had no idea they caught as much fish as they did. So I would say that argument is simply about, well, of course, anything that's looking to monitor something, it's easier to monitor fewer vessels or fewer monoculture farms than it is to monitor a disparate group of small scale farmers or small scale fishers. I mean, that just makes sense at any level of the economy. The government would much rather throw fewer resources at something, and that requires a consolidation of production. So I don't think that's unique to fishing by any means. But yeah, I just think it's harder to regulate them because simply there are more of them. It's pretty easy to see why they might not like it.
But generally, in terms of carbon and in terms of damage to the ecosystem, small boats are a better bet.
Yeah, and in terms of discards as well, the small scale boats discard but virtually nothing.
Right.
So there was a big, with Hugh Fearnley-Whittingstall bringing to attention the discard problem in the European Parliament, probably 10 years ago now.
I remember that,
So on all those things, and then there's the social equality as well. The small boats are owned by, well, the ones we own are owned by the skippers themselves, whereas the larger boats could be distant shareholders. And I think there was something that came out again a while back that Manchester United was the biggest shareholder of some offshore Mauritanian fishing vessel.
Oh my God.
That's the thing, you know, you know very well about the localization, the importance of a localization of an economy.
Yeah.
And Daniel Pauly is this marvelous British Columbian-based marine biologist. He's absolutely fantastic. And
Daniel
Pauly. I'll send you his one-pager.
Okay.
That basically looks at global stats of large versus small, and it's, you know, it's there. They use less fuel. They use less tax subsidies from taxpayers. They use less damaging seabed equipment, so that they discard virtually nothing. And actually, they fish for human consumption. They produce just as much fish as the large industrial vessels do as well, which is again not what either government or industrial fishing communities want you to know. They want you to believe that without these big boats, we'd all starve. And it's just not the case.